We discussed the architecture of SOAP based web service architecture we discussed, right? Let me show the diagram. So we discussed this SOAP web service architecture we discussed. So we had to perform two operations we had to perform on this architecture. We understand that we had to perform two operations. One is you had to know how to use this KSOAP2 library for communicating with web service. Second thing is read the data from the XML file. Okay. So these two operations we had to perform, read the data from the XML file, and first thing is what? How to use the KSOAP2 library for communicating with what? Web service. How to use the KSOAP2 library for communicating with what? Web services. Second thing, anyway, we already know how to read the data from XML. Second thing we already discussed. Okay. So first thing you had to understand how to use this KSOAP2 library for communicating with what? Web services. Okay, so now here for demonstrating this web service calling, for demonstrating this SOAP-based web services calling, so we'll take one web service URL, we'll take one sample web service URL. Okay, just in the internet I given weather visual is a weather visual I given input. I got a visual file I got, but it's difficult to understand this visual file. It's difficult to understand the visual file. We don't know what is the inputs we had to pass and what is the output we'll get and all. So always the visual is going to terminate with @visual. Always the visual is going to terminate with what? @visual it will terminate. If you remove this @visual, if you remove this @visual, if you remove, okay, and you will get the list of services. You will get what? The list of services you will get. You'll get the list of services. Okay. So here, let's select this get cities by country is one service. And we discussed it. A single web service can provide what? A number of services. So if we select this get cities by country, if we select this get cities by country, if we select, okay, you'll get this screen, and here specify the country name here. If we specify the country name and select this invoke button, and we got the list of cities in that particular country. We got the list of cities in that particular country. We got the list of cities information we got. We got the list of cities information from server. We got the list of cities information. Okay. So now we'll develop a simple application we'll develop for demonstrating the SOAP-based web service. So we'll take this service we'll take. If you pass any country name, if you pass as an input, so get the list of cities information. So we found one web service we found. Okay. So to show the list of cities information. Okay. So let's plan a simple application. So my application requirement is here. Let's take the input from the user, like enter country name. Enter country name. Enter what? Country name. Enter country name. Okay. Next we had to create one. Actually create a text box, will create edit text component. Then after this we'll create a button called get cities. So here we'll create a button called what? Get cities is a button we'll create. We'll create a button called what? Get cities is the button we'll create. Okay. So now the requirement is whenever user clicks the get cities button, whenever user selects the get cities button, whenever user clicks the get cities button, so hit the server. So whenever user select the get cities button, hit the server. So from server, it's a SOAP based web service. We are calling the server, we are calling by using SOAP web service. From server, what we'll get? From server, we'll get the response we'll get from the server in a XML format. We'll get the response from the server. From the server, we'll get the response we'll get from the server in a XML format. We'll get the response we'll get from the server in a SOAP based web services. We'll get the response in a XML format. We'll get the response from the server. Now what we have to do is this XML data, whatever the data is there in the XML, that XML data will present on a list on a UI component. Here we'll take a UI component called list.view component. We'll take a UI component called what? List.view is a UI component and will present the data on a list.view component. So here we'll take list.view components. We'll take a list.view component. Okay. On top of this list.view component, we'll present all the list of cities, whatever the country name you given here. So based on that input, you'll get the list of cities, right? So get the list of cities and present the list of cities on a list.view component. Okay, this is the requirement. This is our requirement. Okay, so we'll see how to call these web services by using what type of web service it is. It's a SOAP based web service. It's a SOAP web service. Okay, for calling these SOAP based web services in Android, we are having a library called what? KSOAP2 is an Android library. We are having a library called KSOAP2 is what? Android library. By using this KSOAP2 library, we'll make a request to the web service, meaning this one. Okay, so now we are going to use this KSOAP2 library for all this processing, and from the server you'll get the response you'll get from the server in XML. Read the data from the XML file. Okay, now let's create a project. Let's start a new Android Studio project. Let's start a new Android Studio project. Specify the project. Let's take my project name is SOAP Web Service Test. SOAP WS Test is a project name. Okay, next. Again, next. So take an empty activity. Finish. It's loading the project still. So in XML, first we'll design that user interface. We'll design. This is a requirement. We'll create a text box. We'll create get cities is a button. So get the list of cities information. Okay. So now open the activity XML file. So we'll take the main UI group as linear layout. We'll take We'll take the main UI group as what? Linear layout. So don't require these tools, padding, and all these properties. So orientation is equals to what? Vertical I'm specifying. So first we'll create an edit text component. We'll create. First we'll create a UI component called what? Edit text component, match parent, wrap content, and we require this component into our Java code. So let's specify the ID ET1. If you want, you can configure the hint. You can configure. That is enter country name. Enter country name. Then after this, we'll create we'll create a button component. We'll create width is match parent, height is wrap content, and what is the text you want to display. So I want to display the text as get cities is the text I want to display. Let's configure the click event also. On click is equals to get cities. Okay. Next, after this, we want to create a list view component. We want to create width is match parent and height also I'm specifying as match parent. Okay, and ID is equals to list view is ID, and whenever user clicks the get cities button, we are calling a method. We are calling in the Java called get cities. We create a UI component called enter country name. So whenever user clicks this get cities button, get the list of cities and display the list of cities on a list view component, right? Okay. So in our Java code, we had to create a method. We had to create in Java public. One is so we had to create this method. We had to create in the Java file. We had to create this method. On click is equals to get cities is there, right? This method we had to create in Java. We had to create that method get cities. So view is the input parameter for this method. Public void get cities is the method name. So now here the first thing is, so whenever user clicks the get cities button, we had to make a request to the server, right? And that input we'll get from the edit text component. We'll get that input. So edit text t1. Edit text 1 is equals to edit text. So now the requirement is whenever user clicks the get cities button, we had to make a request to the web service. We had to make a request. We had to make a request to what? To the web service. So first what we had to do is we required the case-of2 library we required for communicating with the SOAP-based web service. We found a web service WSDL file we found. Okay. So it contains two services. Now we want to call this first one, we want to call get cities by country is the first service. Okay. But before going to call this web services a SOAP-based web service, first of all we required a supporting library file we required called what? Case-of2 is the library. Case-of2 is what? The supporting library. We require that case-of2 library file we required. So if you want to get that case-of2 library file, if you want to get, just download that case-of2 library file from internet. Okay. And next after that, we had to add that library file, the jar file. Basically, we'll get a .jar. We'll get download the jar file from internet. Case-of2 Android.jar. Okay. After downloading the jar file, or even I uploaded the project into drive folder. Even in that project also you can find that case-of2 library file. Okay. So you had to import the jar file. You had to import as a module. So let's see here. Just right click on this app. After downloading the jar file, just right click on the app. Right click on the app. You can find option called new here. You can find option called what? New. In this new you can find option called what? Module. Right click on app, select what? New. In new, select what? Module. Right click on app, new, module. Okay. So here you have to select an option called import the jar or R. Here you can find an option import jar or R package. So we have to import this jar file we want to import. Import jar. Next. Select browse option and specify the jar file location where the jar file is available. Okay. In my system, I downloaded the jar file I downloaded, and this is the jar file. Case up to android.jar. This is a jar file. Okay. So now we have to add this. First, we had to add that jar. We had to add as a module. We had to add the dot jar file as a module. Add the jar file. Okay. Even after adding this .jar file as a module also, still we cannot access that case of two classes or interfaces we cannot access. Still we cannot access that case of two library files we cannot access. After adding this jar file as a module, we had to add that module as a dependency module. We had to add that module, we had to add as what? As a dependency module we had to add. If you want to add the module as a dependency module, just right click on this app. Just right click on the app, right click on app. You can find an option called module settings here. Right click on app, you can find an option called what? Open module settings. Select open module settings. Select open module settings. Here you can find the option called dependencies here. Open module settings, you can find the option called what? Dependencies. So after selecting these dependencies, just click on this plus option. Here you can find the option called module dependency. Here you can find the option called what? Module dependency. So select this module dependency. Select this module dependency and add this case of to library file as a dependency module. This is the second step. So first we have to import the jar file as a module, and next we had to add that module as a dependency module. So if you add here in the dependency module, then only we can access that case of to library classes and interfaces we can access in our class, in our project. Otherwise we cannot access without adding the dependencies. Okay. So now here, whenever user select the get cities button, I want to get the cities information I want to get. I want to get the cities information I want to get. And even for calling these SOAP-based web services, we had to configure few properties. We had to configure like what is the web service URL. Okay, a single web service can provide a number of services. Which service you wants to call? What is the input parameters you are sending? Like this, we had to pass some input parameters. We had to pass. Okay, so for this internal processing, for this internal process, I created a class I created, and this class is common for calling any SOAP service. Okay, so that now that class is common for what? Any SOAP calling the SOAP web service, you can use that class. You can use. Okay, so hardly you had to change 4 or 5 parameters. You had to change. That's it. Remaining logic, everything is what? Same. Okay, so I'll show you that class. Even I'll share you that class, that SOAP request class. I'll share you even in our drive folder also. I'll share. So if you want, you can access from there. Okay, drive folder. So give me a second. So we record a class value required. Okay. I told you that this class is common for calling the any SOAP based web services. This is a class SOAP request. Let's copy the class and place this class in your project in the SOAP request app in your package. Let's place this class in the SOAP request class. Let's place in your package. SOAP request.java is the class name. SOAP request is the class name. Okay. Now in this SOAP request class, so there is some logic is there to calling the web services basically. SOAP based web services. So if you want to call, first of all, if you want to call the SOAP based web service, if you want to, you have to configure these properties. You have to configure what is the web service URL we wants to call, what is the SOAP action. SOAP action means nothing but a single web service can provide a number of services. Which web service method you wants to call, let's specify the SOAP action. Okay, so we had to configure these properties we had to configure. Now let's see the first one. What is the web service URL? Web service URL means nothing but this is the web service URL, and the web service URL always is going to terminate with what? At question mark WSDL. We found a web service WSDL file we found. Okay, to get the list of cities information. To get the list of cities information, we found a web service. The web service WSDL file we found for calling the web service. So now specify this WSDL file here. Let's copy the web service URL. Let's copy this web service URL. Okay, and in this SOAP request class, the first parameter is nothing but the web service URL only. The first parameter we had to specify what? The web service URL we had to specify in the first parameter. Which web service you wants to call, we had to specify that the WSDL file location we had to specify. The WSDL file URL we had to specify. That is the first thing. Second thing is nothing but SOAP action. So I told you that if you remove this at question mark WSDL, if you remove, then you will get the list of services you will get. Basically, this is only the WSDL URL. And here only we had to understand what is a web service method, what are the input parameters and all. But it's difficult for us to understand this WSDL file, XML file. That's why what we are doing is, if you remove this at question mark WSDL, if you remove this at question mark WSDL, if you remove, then you will get the list of then you will get the list of web service methods you will get. Then you will get the list of web service methods you will get cities by country and get weather. So if you select this get cities by country, if you select, this is one web service method. This is one web service method. This is another web service method. Like this, a single web service can provide a number of services. Okay, first thing we specified what is a web service you wants to call. We specified the web service URL is specified. Next it is asking boss, a single web service may contains a number of services. Which web service method you wants to call, you have to define in the SOAP action. Okay, so now after removing that WSDL, we got this list of service names, right? So now we want to call which one? Get cities by country service we want to call. Select this get cities by country. Get cities by country. So here you'll get the web service description about the web service. The following is a sample SOAP request and response. So now here, so after selecting that particular web service method, here you can find here. See, here you can find SOAP action. SOAP action is equals to what? Now the HTTP, this is a web service URL. Web service ex.net get cities by country is a web service. Let's copy this web service URL. Let's copy the web service URL. This SOAP action in the web service, which method you want to call, let's copy that one and specify that SOAP action here, the second parameter. Which web service method you want to call, you had to define here. Okay, this is a second thing, SOAP action. And next, what is the next one? Namespace. So here only you can find the namespace also. See, after this method name get cities by country, after this web service method, So we configured XML NS, we configured, meaning XML namespace. After this method name, you see here, get cities by country is a method name. After this, XML NS. XML NS is termed as XML namespace. XML namespace. This is a namespace for that web service. Let's copy this. Let's copy the namespace. Let's copy the namespace and specify this namespace in your project. The next parameter. Specify the namespace of your web service method. Okay. This soap action and method name both are same. Soap action and method name both are what? Both are soap action and the method name both are same. But soap action means will specify along with the URL. Soap action means what? Will specify along with the URL will specify in case of soap action. But method name means nothing but you need to give the URL, you need to give. Just only specify this method name. Just only what? Specify the method name. That's it. Soap action means along with the URL. So method name means only will give the URL will give. That's it. Only will give URL will give. Get cities by country is a method name. That's it. Get cities by country is the method name. And if you want to pass any input parameters, if you want to pass, we had to define the input parameters. We had to define here. Okay. So here for our project in our example, the web service is taking how many parameters as input? Only one parameter it is taking as input. What is the input name? Country name is the input, and what type of data it is? It is a string type of data. So let's copy this name because it has to be same. So while you are sending the data from the application, this name should be what? Same. Okay. So here request dot add property, specify the property here, country and country name. Here in our example, we are passing only one input parameter. Like if you are having multiple parameters, just add this request dot add property multiple times. That's it. If you want to send a multiple parameters to server, just add request dot add property of send the values. Okay. Okay. So first parameter is the country name. First parameter is what? The country name. Second thing is nothing but we have to get the value. So this method is there, right? Request. Now we'll change the method name also will change. Method name is nothing but request cities is a method. We'll get one input parameter for this method, that is city will get as an input parameter for this method. We'll get an input parameter we'll get, that is what? Not city, country. Country name will get as a input parameter to this method. So now here request dot add property, we are sending the country name, we are sending to the server. This is the key, it should be same. Just we have to check in the soap action whatever the name is there for your in the soap action method name, the input parameter name, we have to configure the same name we have to configure. Okay. And here we are getting an input parameter for this method called country name is the input parameter. Okay. The country name will send as a input parameter to server. That's it. Internally there is some logic is there. This logic basically, so converting your object into XML, next XML to SOAP XML, and putting the SOAP XML into HTTP request. So this logic will take care of all these things, and you will get the return type. You will get the from the server in XML format. You will get the response from the server. Meaning XML format means that entire data is going to be stored in a string format. XML file is going to be stored in a string format. That XML string is going to be written. This logic is same, boss. This logic is same for calling any SOAP based web service. This logic is same. Only the logic will be changed here only. Only these four parameters. Like what is the web service URL you wants to call? What is the web service method name? What is the namespace? And if it is taking any input parameters, let's specify the parameters by using add property method. And remaining this logic is same for calling all the SOAP based web services. And the return type from the server you will get in a XML format, you will get the return type from the server. That XML format we are returning in a string format, we are returning that one. Okay. This is one web service method we create, request cities. Now here, whenever user clicks the get cities button, we had to call that web service we had to call. So if you want to call the web service, so let's specify soap request is a class we created. Soap request is equals to what? New soap request. Soap request is equals to what? New soap request. The soap request object dot, there is a method called request cities is a method name. What is a method name? Request cities is a method name. Soap request object dot request cities is a method. In this request cities, so you'll get the value we'll get from edit text one component, right? Et1 dot get text dot toString. We'll get the value from edit text one component. We'll get the value we'll get. That's it. So it's going to make it. It's going to hit the server. It's going to hit the server, and from the server you'll get the response. You'll get from the server in which format? In a string format. You'll get the response from server, request or result or something. Okay, but even if you execute this, even if you execute this application, if you execute, you cannot get the output. You cannot get, because it's a network call. We are calling the network logic. We are calling here soap request is equals to new soap request. Internet is going to call what? A network calls. Network calls you cannot execute in the activity thread. We cannot execute the network logic. You cannot execute in the activity thread. You cannot execute. Then what you have to create? If you want to make any network call, if you want to make, or if any logic is taking some time to process, we had to move that logic into what? Asynchronous task we had to move. We discussed already this asynchronous task. We are asynchronous task, the concept we already discussed. If any logic is taking some time to process, the activity thread will not wait to complete the process. Okay. To execute that long operations, we had to create what? An asynchronous task will create. Okay. So now here, so after this method, getCities method, we had to create what? An asynchronous task. So after this method only, before creating the before closing this activity class, I'm creating one inner class. I'm creating class. Let's take my task. My task extends what? Extends asynchronous task. That's it. Class my task extends what? Asynchronous task. This asynchronous task contains an abstract method. This asynchronous task contains an abstract method called doInBackground. Just if you click on the error, show you what is the solution for this. We have to implement the methods. We have to implement. Let's implement the methods called doInBackground. Okay. So now in this doInBackground method, before the return type, whatever the logic network call, let's move the logic into what? Let's move the logic into doInBackground method. Let's move the logic into what? Into doInBackground method. Okay. And how you will get the confirmation whether data loading process is completed or not? How you will get the confirmation whether the loading process is completed or not? So simple. Once the loading process is completed, once the data loading process is completed, it's going to call a method called onPostExecute method. Once the loading process is completed, it's going to call what? OnPostExecute method is going to call. So after this doInBackground method, it's going to call which method? OnPostExecute method is going to call. In the asynchronous task, once the loading process is completed, it's going to call the onPostExecute method is going to call. So in this onPostExecute method, see this result object, I mean this string variable, at the time of loading the data, just move it to global variable. I'm taking a global variable. I'm taking string result. Just I created what? A global variable I created. Okay, result is equals to request dot request cities. And once the loading process is completed, it's going to call on post execute method, right? Once the data loading process is completed, it's going to call the on post execute method is going to call. In this on post execute method, so we'll print that response will print. Let's take system.out.println now. System.out.println of result. What are the response we got from the server? That response we are printing. Just we are printing that response we are printing in a console. We return system.out.println, meaning where this information is going to be print. This information will not be print on the screen. This information is going to be print in the console. I mean, we are having a tool called logcat is a tool. So in that logcat, it's going to print the information system.out.println of result. Okay. But this asynchronous task also will not execute. Automatically, this asynchronous task will not execute. This asynchronous task will not execute. Automatically, it will not execute the asynchronous task. Explicitly, we had to execute the asynchronous task. We had to execute explicitly. So whenever user clicks the get cities button, we had to execute that asynchronous task. We had to execute. Let's take my task is equals to new my task. Create the object for your asynchronous task class name. My task is equals to new my task, and asynchronous task object dot execute is a method to execute the asynchronous task. My task is equals to what? New my task. The asynchronous task object dot execute is a method to execute the asynchronous task. That's it. So whenever user clicks the get cities button, we are executing an asynchronous task. We are executing. We are calling a URL. We'll get the response. We'll get in a string format. We are printing that response. We are printing in a log. We are printing that response initially. Okay. And even we had to add one more statement also. We had to add directly. We cannot execute this asynchronous task. We cannot execute directly. To work with asynchronous task or to execute this asynchronous task, we had to add one statement here in the onCreate method to execute the asynchronous task. Of course, this is a logic to execute the asynchronous task, but we had to add this statement. If your response contains a very less amount of data, quickly we can get the data from the server. But if your response is taking some time, then we had to add this code. We had to add in your activity onCreate method. That is nothing but strict mode dot thread policy is equals to new strict mode dot thread policy dot builder dot permit all dot build. There is a method called permit all dot build is the method, so that you'll get the object for thread policy object. You'll get strict mode dot thread policy. We require the object for this thread policy. We require the object to create the object. So strict mode dot thread policy dot builder dot permit all dot build is a method. So now, so here state mode dot thread policy of state mode dot, there is a method called set thread policy of, specify the policy object. That's it. So now if you add this statement, then we can execute the asynchronous task. We can execute. Okay. So if you are loading the huge amount of data we are loading from the server, okay, then we had to add this statement. We had to add. Okay. So this is a logic written. We are calling asynchronous task when user clicks the get cities button. We got the response from the server. That response is hold into one string variable. Okay. And after loading the entire data, it's going to call the on post execute method. In the on post execute method, we are printing that response. We are printing in a log. We are printing. Okay. So let's add internet permission and run the application. Because we are accessing internet, we are accessing. So in the manifest.xml, let's add the internet permission. users permission, internet. Okay, let's run the application. Run the application and see the output. Let's open this Android monitor. Here you can find a tool called Android monitor is a tool. Android monitor is a tool. Basically here you can find the error information, exception, log, everything you can find here. So I'll clear the log. I'll clear this Android monitor. There is a tool called what? Logcat is a tool. Okay. Okay. So app is installed. Let's give the input. I want to get the list of India cities information I want to get. India cities information list I want to get. So given India given and click on this get cities button. Click on what? The get cities button. And see here, we got the response we got from the server. We got the response we got from the server and see in which format we got the response from server. In a XML format we got the response from the server. New data set is a main root tag. It contains a child tag called table is a tag. This table tag contains two tags, inner tags again. Country is one tag and city is another tag. This is another city information. This is another city information. This is another city information. We got the response we got from the server. In XML format, we got the response from the server. Table is the main root tag, contains two tags called country and city. So we got the response we got from the server. We got the response. We got the response from the server. We got the response. The list of cities information we got the response from server. But in which format it is available now? In a XML format it is available. New dataset is a main root tag. Individual city is available with a tag name called table. Individual city information is available with the tag called what? So table is a tag name. Table is what? The tag name. Okay. So now here we have to write that XML parsing logic we have to write. Now we have to write the XML parsing logic we have to write. Our requirement is only get the list of cities information. Our requirement is what? Only get the list of cities information we want to get. Okay. Now let's see here how to get the list of cities information. So we got the response we got from the server. We got the response we got from the server in a XML format. We got the response from the server. But directly we cannot present this XML data on the directly we cannot present this XML data we cannot present on the list view component. What we had to do now? We had to parse the XML data. Whatever the data is there in the XML, you had to parse that XML data and you had to store that list of cities is there, right? The list of cities information we had to store into one string array. We had to parse that XML data we had to parse and we had to store that list of cities information we had to store into one string array we had to store. But string array means nothing but array is having a lot of disadvantages. And in Java, rather than using the arrays concept, we use a concept called what? Collection concept. Okay. So array is having disadvantages. Memory is going to be wasted in case of array. So that in place of string array, we use a collection concept. We use one of the collection is nothing but array list. So purpose of using this one is nothing but it's a resizable array. So how many values are available? It's going to allocate the memory for up to that many values. So whatever the data is there in the XML, now we had to convert that XML data. We had to convert into an array list, meaning that all the list of cities information we had to store into an array list. We had to store, and now that list we had to present on a now that list. If the values are available in an array or list, we know how to present the values by using array adapter or by using custom adapter. In case of single value, array adapter. In case of multiple values in a single row, custom adapter. By using the adapter, we'll present the values we'll present on the list view component we'll present. That's it. Okay. Okay, we got the response we got from the server. That response we stored into one string variable. We stored the response. Now here, let's create a method. Let's create a method called parse XML is a method. I'm passing this result object. I'm passing as an input parameter for the parse XML method. What is the method name? Parse XML is a method. Parse XML is a method. I'm sending this string. Whatever the response we received, that string result, I'm sending as an input parameter to which method? To the parse XML method. Parse XML method. I'm sending that string response, whatever we got, that response I'm sending as an input parameter to which method? Parse XML method. So we had to create a method we had to create called parse XML is a method. We had to create a method we had to create called what? Parse XML. Public void parse XML is a method which is taking the there only we can write the logic, but I don't want to write everything in that single method. Just that's why I want to segregate the code separately. That's why I created a separate method called parse XML, which is taking the result object as a input. Okay, here we got the response we got from the server in a string format. I mean XML format is stored into a string format. Okay, so now we create a method called parse XML method. Parse XML is a method. This method is taking a response called string. It contains the XML data. Now tell me how you'll read the data from the XML file. How you'll read the data from the XML file. We got the response in a string format. I mean in XML data we got as a string format. Now we had to read the data from this XML file. How you'll read the data from the XML file? We discussed, right? We discussed DOM parser, we discussed SAX parser, we discussed. Then after that we discussed XML pull parser, we discussed. Okay, which parser we had to use at least? Which parser we had to use to read the data from this XML file? Hmm? XML pull parser. Yeah. So we had to use XML pull parser. We had to use to read the data from this XML file. We had to use XML pull parser to read the data from XML. Okay. So what is the first statement? We had to create an object for XML pull parser factory class. We had to create an object. First, we had to create an object for what? XML pull parser factory class. We had to create an object. XML pull parser factory is equals to XML pull parser factory dot new instance is a method to get the object for XML pull parser factory. We had to get the object for what? XML pull parser factory class object we had to get first. Then after that we had to create the object for XML pull parser. Then after that we had to create the object for what? XML pull parser. We had to create an object. XML pull parser is equals to your XML pull parser factory object dot. There is a method called new pull parser is a method. The XML pull parser factory object dot new pull parser is a method to get the object of what? XML pull parser. Okay. So now this XML pull parser contains a method. Now this XML pull parser object contains a method called set input is a method. What is the method name? Set input is a method. The XML pull parser object dot set input is a method. See, this set input method is taking. See, what is the input parameters for this set input method? Either you had to specify the file reader object. Either you had to specify what? The file reader object is one thing. Second thing is the input stream. It's taking only two parameters, boss. Either you had to specify the file reader object or you had to specify the input stream object. You had to specify any one of these parameters. You had to specify file reader or input stream. But we are having the data in which format? String format. We are having the data. We are having the data in a string format, but the input parameter for that method is nothing but either input stream object or file reader object. Okay, so here whatever the string data we are having, that string we had to convert into either file reader. File reader means nothing but whatever the data is there in the string format, that string data we had to write into an XML file we had to write, and again we had to read the data from that XML file. It's lengthy process. converting your XML data into a file, and again read the data from a file. It's a lengthy process. Rather than that, second option is there, that is there, right? Input stream. You can convert that string data, you can convert into an input stream format, you can convert. For this conversion, we are having a third party library called Commons IO is the library. There is a class called IO utils is the class. There is a class called what? IO utils. If you want to convert into input stream, if you want to convert the string data, there is a method called to input stream is a method, and you can specify that string object, you can specify as a input parameter to this IO utils. So it's going to convert the data, it's going to convert into input string. Or if you want to convert the string, if you want to convert, now we are converting the string, we are converting into an input string. Now input string you want to convert into string format. Again, it also contains a method called IO to string of. Basically, it's a common requirement, boss. In our applications, you'll get this requirement converting the input stream object into a string format or string into input stream. It's a common requirement. Programmatically also we can do this one, but it's a lengthy process. Converting the string into input string. So we had to take a lot of logic we had to write. So rather than that, this is a class, IOUtils is a class. But this IOUtils is not part of Android and not part of Java. This IOUtils class is what? Not part of Android and not part of what? Java. Okay. It's a third party library. This IOUtils is a third party library called Commons IO. This IOUtils is available in a third party library called what? Commons IO is a third party library. Now we had to add this third party library, we had to add to our project to use this IOUtils class. So it's mandatory, we had to add. Otherwise, programmatically, you had to convert the string object, you had to convert into an input string format. Okay, let's download the jar file. What is the jar file name? Commons io.jar. Okay, already downloaded. I'll add that jar file. I'll add as a module for your project first. Let's right click on this app. Here you can find an option called modules. Here you can find an option called new. Select module here. New, select what? Module. Here let's select import jar RR. Next, select browse. Select the jar file location where the jar file is available and which jar file you want to import. Commons IO is a jar we want to import. Let's select this Commons IO jar. Commons IO 2.4. Let's add this jar file. Let's add the jar file. Click on finish. Okay, so we added the jar file, we added as a module. We added the jar file as a module, but still we cannot access this class, we cannot access because we had to add the jar file. Whatever the jar we added as a module, we had to add that project as a dependency module we had to add. Let's right click on this app. Let's right click on the app. You can find an option called here module settings. You can find an option called what? Module settings. So select this module settings, open module settings, open module settings and select an option here called dependencies. Open module settings, dependencies. So add here, select module dependency. In module dependency, now we had to add this Commons IO module we had to add. Select this OK button. And see here, now once the loading is completed, automatically clear this error. Now it's showing the error right here. Now it is asking to import the class. That's it. Just you have to import that IOUtils class. You have to import. So now here parser.set input is a method. We have a data in a string format, but we require the data in a input string format. So there is a class called IOUtils is the class. See, now we got this class, we got IOUtils. Earlier this class is not there. Let's take the IOUtils class, IOUtils dot There is a method called what? To input stream is a method. To input stream is a method. Let's convert that string data, whatever the response we got, that response will convert into a string format will convert. Okay, that is result. Okay, second parameter is the encoding. So we'll specify this encoding as null, and by default it's a UTF-8 only. By default the encoding standard is what? UTF-8. So if you make it null, by default it will take UTF-8. So this logic is going to give an exception. This logic will give an exception. Put the logic inside the try catch. Next, what is the next one? Recall your last classes. We discussed XML parsing classes, right? Read the data from XML pull parser or read the data from SAX parser. What is the next step? We specified from which file or what is the data source. Next, what is the next one? So we had to write the logic to move to the next statements until the end of the file. We had to write the logic to move to the next statements until the end of the document. For this, let's take int I is equals to parser dot. There is a method called get event type is a method. What is the method name? Parser dot get event type is a method. So if you call the parser dot get event type, you will get the initial position you will get. What is the initial position? In the XML file, you will get the initial position you will get in the XML. Meaning initially, what is the position? Always it will focus on the start document. Always it is focusing on what? Start document it will focus. Now we had to move to the next statements. In the parser, XML pull parser, we had to specify to move to the next statements, read the next tag until the end of the document. So we had to create a simple loop we had to create while I is not equals to, just we discuss this one, just listen once that XML parsing concept once again, okay, if you are not understanding. While I is not equals to parser dot end document. Parser dot what? End document. Meaning we want to repeat this process, we want to repeat until the end of the document. Which process? Moving to the next statements. Moving to the next statements. First read the first tag, second tag, third tag, like how many tags are there? Read the entire XML file until what? Until the end of the document. Okay. So now here, if it is start tag, if I is double is equals to start tag, when it is reading the data from a beginning tag, this block is going to call. When it is reading the data from text, it's going to call this one. If I is double is equals to parser dot text, if I is double is equals to what? Parser dot text, and I is double is equals to parser dot end tag. If I is double is equals to parser dot, what is the next one? End tag. Start tag, text, and end tag. So read to the next statements. Read to what? The next statements until the end of the document. So based on that particular tag type, we are calling that particular. It's going to call this particular block. Okay. If it is beginning of a tag, it's going to call the start tag. Here, I'm taking one boolean variable. I'm taking a boolean variable here. Boolean. Which information we required? We required only city information we required. Let's make it city is equals to false. Let's make city is equals to what? False. And here we want to store the entire data into an array list we want to store, right? So in this method, array list of list is equals to new array list. Our requirement is we want to store that entire cities we want to store into one array list we want to store. That's why first I created one array list object I created first. Okay. So here in this start tag, whenever it is beginning of a tag, it's going to call the start tag method is going to call. In this start tag method, if the tag name is equals to city, let's write the logic here. If parser dot there is a method called get name. I mean, if the tag name is equals with city tag, Why we are writing the logic like this? Because it contains other tag also, country tag, but we don't require the country tag information. We don't require which tag information we require. We require only the city tag information we require. That's why I taken a boolean variable. I taken here boolean city is equals to what? False. Whenever it is reading the data from a city tag, whenever it is reading the data, we have to make it city is equals to what? True. We have to make. We have to make this city. We have to make it true. Okay. Next, whenever it is reading the data, after beginning of a tag, it's going to call text is going to call, right? In this text, let's write the logic here. If city is true, meaning whenever it is reading the data from a city tag, then only city is going to become what? True. If city is true, we created array list object, we created globally. Let's add the value to the array list. List2.add of parser.getText. Whenever it is reading the data from a city tag, then only we are adding the value we are adding to the list we are adding. Whenever we are adding the value to, whenever we are reading the data from city tag, that value we are adding to what? To array list we are adding. While it is closing a tag, we have to make this parser.getName equals ignore case, make city is equals to false. Nothing, boss. When city is going to become true? Whenever it is reading the data from a city tag, it's going to become true. Next, it's going to contain the text. Add that value if city is true, meaning if it is reading the data from the city tag, then only add the value to the list. While it is closing of a tag, then we are making city is equals to false. Why we are writing the logic like this? Because we don't require the country's information. Because in the XML response, whatever we got, it contains the country information also it requires. Sorry, it contains the country information also. But we don't require the country information. We require only what? City information we require. That's why we've taken a boolean variable called city. Whenever it is beginning of a tag, it's a tag is starting with city tag, make city is equals to true. Next it is going to call what? Text is going to call. In the text, what is the logic written? If city is true, meaning if it is reading the data from the city tag, then only add this value to what? To the array list object. And if it is closing of a tag, let's make it city is equals to false. Why we are making it false while it is closing? Because when it is reading the data from the next tag is what? Country. We don't require this information, we don't require it. That's why we are writing the logic like this. When it is beginning of a tag from city, make it city is equals to true. If it is reading the data from city tag, then only add the value to list. When it's closing of a tag, let's make it city is equals to false. That's it. So now we stored that entire response. Whatever the response we got from the server in XML, we stored that entire response. We stored into one list object. We stored the entire response. Whatever the response we got from the server, that entire response we stored into what? One array list object we stored. Array list object we stored. Okay. Now I'll change the return type. I'll change return type of this parse XML method. Now it's a void, right? Void is a return type. Now in place of this void, I'll change to I'll change the return type. I'll change from array list of string. Now earlier it's a void, but what is the return type now? Return type of this parse XML method is nothing but array list of string is the return type. Array list of what? String is the return type of this method now. Okay, if you add a return type, if you add, definitely before closing of a method, what we had to do? When it is closing a method, what we had to do? We had to return that list. We had to return whatever the type you are returning. We had to return that list. That's it. So we are reading the data from the XML file. We are storing into array list object. We are storing, and that array list object we are what? Returning that array list object. Meaning from wherever you are calling this method, from wherever you are calling this parse XML method. So here you'll get what type you'll get? You'll get array list of string. You will get. So from where you are calling this method, okay. So here we are calling a method, right? If you call this method, the return type of this method is nothing but array list of string is a return type. Array list of string is a return type. Okay. So now we'll get the response we'll get, and even we stored that response into an array list object, we stored the response. Now, if the data is available in an array list, it's simple for us to present the data. If the data is available in a string array or in an array list format, it's easy for us to present the data. And it's only a string type of data. So here we are having a concept called array adapter. Initial classes we discussed array adapter, and you have to specify what type of data we are presenting. We are presenting what? The string type of data we are presenting. Adapter is equals to new array adapter. Array adapter is equals to what? New array adapter. We had to specify three parameters. We had to specify. Have you remembered what are the parameters? Autocomplete text view, spinner, gal, list view. We discussed a lot of components. We discussed, right? What are the input parameters we had to pass for this array adapter? Three parameters we had to pass. One is the context. If you want to get the context, first thing is we have to specify get application context. Second parameter is the XML file. We want to get the built-in XML file you want to access. So if you want to get the built-in XML file, android dot r dot android dot r dot layout dot, all these are the built-in XML files. You can take any XML file you can take here. I'm selecting the second XML file, simple list item single choice. Taking the second XML file. What is the XML file name? Simple list item single choice. You can take any XML box. There is no any restriction. Third parameter is nothing but the list of configured values. Now here the list of configured values are available in the list object. The list object contains the entire data. Now the third parameter you have to specify. The list object you have to specify. List. Okay. Now we had to set this adapter. We had to set to the list view component. In the XML file, we created a list view component we created in the XML. Get that list view component. Get the list view component from the XML file. Find UID art.id dot list view component. Get the list view component from the activity XML. Now we create adapter also we created. Now set this adapter to the list view component. List view component dot set adapter of, specify the adapter object. That's it. List view dot set adapter of what? Specify the adapter object. We got the response from the server and we stored the response, enter response into an array list we stored, and we created an array adapter for presenting the data. List view dot set adapter of adapter object. Let's run the application. Showing some errors somewhere. Where? While I is not equals to. That's it. Okay. Let's run the program now. Right, connect the charger. So once again, I'll connect the charger. I'll connect. Yes. Okay, so now app is installed. App is what? Installed. And give a country name here. You can give any country name as input. And once if you click the get cities button, see here, once if you select the get cities button, we got the response we got from the server. We got the response we got from the server, but the text is displaying in a white color. Text is what? Displaying in a white color. We got it is the text is displaying. We got the response we got the response we got from server, we got the response, but it is displaying what? In a white color text it is displaying, meaning the XML file we specified right here, maybe it is displaying the text in a white color, I guess. Okay, here two solutions are nothing but there are two solutions. One is you can create your own XML. You can create your own XML file you can create, and you can display that XML file on the individual item. Or let's open your project manifest.xml. See in your project manifest.xml, when you create a project, by default it's going to apply the theme it's going to apply for your project. When you create a project, by default it is going to apply a default theme it will apply for your project. This is a theme. Android colon theme is equals to ed style, some theme properties applied, right? By default it's going to apply this property, will apply by default. Now remove this theme attribute, don't require this. Remove the theme attribute. Okay, so we don't require the theme attribute, we don't require. So and once if you remove the theme attribute, if you remove once, and your activity, see by default a activity extended what? App compact activity, right? This app compact activity will not work without that theme. So now replace this app compact activity with the activity class. That's it. Replace that app compact activity with what? Activity class. Let's run the code now. We got the output we got, but only one problem is text we got with the white color. That's why we removed the theme we removed. But if you remove the theme, this app compact activity will not work. Replace that app compact activity with what? Activity class. Now here specify the country name. I specify the country name as India is specified. Click on get cities. So we got the list of cities information we got. We got the list of cities information we got from the server. These are the India cities. Hyderabad, Vijayawada, Kadapa, Ballari. Okay. So these are all what? These are all what? The India cities. If you want to get Canada cities, for example, I specified Canada is specified and click on this get cities button. So now we got the Canada cities information we got. In this information we are getting from the server, we are getting this information. In a XML format, we are getting the information. We are reading that XML data and we are presenting the data on a list view component we are presenting. Okay. This is calling the SOAP service. This is calling the SOAP based web services. Yes, we are passing only one input parameter. So if we are having multiple parameters, that request.add property in the SOAP test class is there, right? There. So the multiple parameters. Okay. Any queries in this? Any queries in the today's session? Of course, it's difficult to understand at the beginning stage, at the learning stage, but we don't have an option because it's mandatory. It's strongly recommended every Android developer or a mobile application developer should have a knowledge on the web services calling part, because without web services we cannot develop any type of application in the market. Okay, so it's strongly recommended to have a knowledge on the web service calling for every mobile application developer, and the response will get in XML or JSON format. You have to parse the data and you have to present the data, okay, to the UI components. That's it. Okay. Any queries was in the today's session? Send me the response. No. So now let's see. See, every URL is not a web service. For example, just yesterday Rakesh is sent one mail. Just give me 1 minute.